So I turn it on there. I just get this thing in order, just making a cut. Okay, now I'm going to zero my X. I'm not going to, well, I'll go ahead and zero this, but I'm not too concerned with Z, because I know I'm going to come up to where I got this color on this thing shined up. So we'll go in about 100 thousandths again. I could probably take a heavier cut, but 100 thousandths is just fine. All right. Okay. One thing, if you're starting out with a lathe, is that by making these little jigs and fixtures and stuff, little tools for your shop, each one of them is educational. And rather than buying things, some things you have to buy, but a lot of things you make yourself. And each one of them, you learn some real valuable skills. As with this little project here, we're learning about facing, turning up to a shoulder, cutting a shoulder, and then also, now I'm going to stop that right about there, come out, dial in another 100 thousandths, up to 200. Okay. Check my time here real quick. Okay, we're 37 minutes. I might, when I get this in on the computer to edit, I might break this into part 1 and part 2. I'm not sure. I'd appreciate your comments, you know, whether this one will probably go like 45 minutes. Whether you'd prefer that or just have a part 1 and part 2. I kind of like to keep it around 15 or 20 minutes, but this was a little bit involved. I could edit out, and I may do that. I could have edited out a lot of this turning stuff in the middle, but I'd like to hear from you guys if it's boring or something. I'll edit it out. I'll just have to see how it looks once I get it on the computer and start editing. Okay, I'm coming up here to my stopping point. Okay. Now I dial in another 100 thousandths, up to 300 thousandths. Years ago, back in the 80s, I was kind of interested in a DRO, but at the time it was about $6,000, and you had to have a technician come out. It's pretty complicated to install. I installed this one about a year ago, finally, and I've got one on my Z-axis of my mill, and instead of being around $6,000 like they were years ago, now you can get a first-class DRO from your lathe for about $1,100, and you can do better than that if you buy some of the Active Remote stuff. And it's really not that hard to do. So, all right, we're going to go in 300 thousandths again. Excuse me, I gotta have a little dry throat. Like I say, I'm not sure. When I get this thing on the computer, I'll be moving from one camera to the next. To try to give the best view I can of just what's going on here. Okay, we're coming up on that shoulder again. All right, down another 100 thousandths here. So we've taken out, with this cut, we'll have taken off 400 thousand. That's 4/10 of an inch. I could run this faster, but in my experience with carbide, you can go about twice as fast with high-speed steel. I could run this at 500 RPM, but 360 is nice and it's not throwing stuff around. Some guys have a tendency to take too light of cuts at too high a speed. The books will tell you, it'll give you some recommendations on surface speed per minute and that sort of thing. But it's something you really kind of have to work out with your lathe and your abilities. Okay. Now we'll bring this up. Down another 100 thousandths. Okay. We're getting a pretty good finish even with these 100,000 cuts. Check my time real quick. Yeah, we're about 43-minute mark. Now to get down to that 1 inch, I know the other one I took 6 100,000 passes, but I measured first. I won't do that again. Won't have to. Okay. Okay, now let's see if I got. I hope I didn't turn that thing. Just every once in a while you want to check, make sure you're still tight there. Okay, now let's go in 600 thousandths more. Another 100 thousandths in. I could use a faster feed, but we're not in that big a hurry here. In a production shop, I'd probably, if I was, okay, I'm right about my mark up here. Okay. Now we'll measure that again. Let's see, wipe that off a little bit. I had to double check my audio, make sure that we're still recording here. The audio is still going good. We're in about 46 minutes, which is going a little bit long. Okay, 1 inch. All right, we're at 1.89. So let's take 70,000 off that. Once you got confidence with your dials on your lathe or DRO, you don't have to measure as often. Like I say, it's self-evident that you can take it off a lot easier than you can put it back on. So we'll do about 70 thousandths on that. So we'll go to 670. Okay, that should get us pretty darn close. And engage our power feed again. You want to be careful when you reach over to get a drink of coffee or Pepsi, whatever you're drinking, or light a cigarette, because you don't want to take your attention away from the cutting tool and the workpiece, because that can sure get a crash. Even after all these years, I can still get a crash if I'm not Johnny on the spot, not paying attention. Okay, so we're going to come up to our nominal 2 inches here on this shaft. Just about there. Okay. Now, I'm going to come out here and measure this once again. Not a bad finish. All right. I'm using a Mitutoyo. Most of my tools are Mitutoyo. Okay, I'm about 13 thousandths high. So I'm going to take off about 10 thousandths on that. 1.023. Let's take off about 10 thousandths. And see, so we'll go to 6, we'll take off about 13,000. We'll go to 0.6800. There we go. All right, now one. Maybe this will be a final cut. Okay. Now you can see the swarf coming off here is pretty fine stuff. So yeah, that's a nice finish there. Now, I'm going to bring it out here. Wipe it off again. Take another measurement. All right. Okay, I'm about 1.03. I'm going to try my collet, just in case I want to use that end for the collet. Okay, I'm still just a hair tight on that. So let's take off 5 thousandths more. So we'll go from 682 to about 687. Yeah, we'll make it 688. All right. This will be a pretty fine cut here. I don't want to crash into that shoulder, so I'll stop it just before I get there. Then go in by hand here, like John cutting the shoulder. And now I'll bring this thing out. Make sure I got a nice clean shoulder on this side. Okay. And then I'll put it back to 6'8", 6'8", 8, I think it was. In case I have to make another cut. Now I'll try that. Wipe it down a little bit here. That's just about right. We'll measure that, but I'm sure it's right at an inch. That's just right, almost exactly an inch. So that'll work in our collet just fine. Now, I did face that off. All right, now, what I'm going to do here is turn this around to cut our 60-degree center on it. Wipe this down here a little bit. Okay, now this part will go in here, like this, right up to that shoulder, and I'll get it locked in here, and we'll get set up to do our center on it. Now, cutting the center, I'm only going to make a couple of cuts on this, just to show you how we get set up. I'm going to turn the coolant off for a little bit. so we don't have that abstraction. Now we've got to set up our our top slide or compound. This can be called either the top slide or the compound. You'll hear it referred to as both. And I got to set that up for 30 degrees. And yesterday when I was trying this, I made the mistake. I thought I had it for 30 degrees, but it was 60 degrees, which would give me a 120 angle out here, which would be way too blunt for the 60 degrees I want. So what I've got to do is to move this my tool around here, and I've got it set up right here on my thing. Now your lathe may different. My index mark here is right at 30 degrees, but I've got to spin the tool around to get the angle of attack I'm going to need on this thing. And now you have to adjust your tool to where it's going to cut, but also you've got to be able to get it far enough over. What I'm going to do is I could turn the tool clear around this way and cut across this, but I'm going to cut across the back side, which means with this right hand tool I'll just run my lathe in reverse. I can do that because I got a D14 cam lock. If you got a threaded chuck, if you got a threaded spindle mount, then your chuck might come loose, so you'd have to do it a different way. Okay, now let's see if I get this thing lined up here. You got to do a little jockeying around because you can only get as far over there as the stop is. All right. Okay. Now that's my stop. So I'll offset this thing just a little bit more to where. Okay. Now you can have this thing cantilevered over just a little bit for some light cuts. Now I'm going to lock this thing down and try that. You want to be sure you got it down and tight. Okay. All right, now, of course, this is all done by hand. Okay, so I think it's in here, and I take my first cut here. It's kind of a heavy cut, but I'll try it. That's a little bit too heavy, so let me do it just a little bit more. Okay. Try that now. All right. It is in and out. Okay. In and out. So I'm advancing my tool in with my carriage handle. Now I'm going to change my angle just a little bit here. A little bit better. That angle just a little bit better there. Now I'm not going to go through all these. I should have probably set this up to cut from this side here so I wouldn't have to make so many adjustments. But I'm going to show you what the finished project would look like. This one I was working on yesterday, and you can see I've got a nice sharp 60-degree corner on there. But we're already an hour into this thing, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here. And you can see, though, that we got our taper started, and that wouldn't take that many more passes to get that finished. But I'll finish that up later off camera. Well, for now, let me sit down here a minute. We'll wrap this thing up. All right. Well, let me finish up by saying that today I was using carbide inserts. There's a lot of different tools you can use. Some of you may want to start off with high-speed steel. And I recommend you get, you should have a copy of this anyway, the Manual of Lathe Operation Machinist Tables. It's been around for years, and it's been pre-published. I don't know if you can still buy a copy of it. I'm certainly on eBay. You can probably find a copy. But in there it shows you pictures, and you can learn how to grind high-speed steel tools if you want. Now I started off high-speed steel, and then about 82 or so I started with the brazed carbide tools, and I really like them. You can buy them to fit your tool post, and in all kinds of sizes, from a 1/4 inch, 3/8 up to 1 1/4 inch or better if you want. Then I made the move up to, I bought some back about, my first inserts had a square insert, or more or less square, a 4-sided insert. And the problem with those is that when you're turning up to a shoulder, there's no way you can adjust your angle of attack to both cut that and then without changing it just turn your profile and come right up the shoulder and come straight out. Whereas with the triangular shaped ones, you don't get as many cutting sizes, but with that triangle, see, I can adjust that just right where it makes a nice finish on cutting my profile, comes up that shoulder, then I just bring it right out, and so I go to I use a 3-sided tool, and I buy a good grade of it. When you buy in carbide, you want to get, in these brazed carbide, you want to get the C5 or C6 grade. That's a good general purpose. It's hard, but it'll take interrupted cuts well. In the inserts, I use what was called CP50. Now they call them CP500. That's the grade, and that's a good general purpose grade I use for aluminum, brass, steel. It'll take interrupted cuts real well. And I use a negative, they talk about a negative and positive rake. Now some people say, well, with the smaller lathes, unless you got a 16-inch or bigger, you don't want to use a negative rake. Well, I like the negative rake because I got 3 cutting edges on a triangle-shaped tool, plus with a negative rake I can turn it over and get 3 more, so I get 6 per cut, or 6 per index. Now, get a hold of a machinist or something. If I can remember to do it, I'll put the tools I'm using. Don't be tempted to buy the sets. I know it's a temptation, but here's a catalog, and you look through these catalogs of tool holders and inserts and stuff. There must be 6, 8, 10,000 combinations. So don't be afraid to, if you know a machinist, ask him what he's using, or the good thing is to call Carbolet or Seco or one of the people that make the tool holders and inserts, or call somebody like MSC and talk to an engineer, one of their technical people. Tell them what the size your lathe is and what you plan on doing. But it's real tempting to buy a set from one of the tool houses of 7 tools will cover everything. Well, I found out through experience that I don't need right-hand turning tool, left-hand turning tool, right-hand facing tool, left-hand facing tool. I've learned, now here's an old right-hand facing tool. And you can see it's a little different from this one. Well, you just adjust your angle of attack, and this will face, and then you adjust it, and it'll profile. So these are things that I keep around. I'm probably going to put them on eBay, but that's just some ideas. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, folks, and I sure thank you a lot, and I'd really appreciate your comments and suggestions. And before I go, I'd like to thank a neighbor gal, Danny, she comes in every 3 or 4 months and cleans this place up a little bit, gives it a good cleaning. I'm pretty good at about keeping the swarf out of the way, and so I'm not stepping in and stuff. But it's nice to have somebody come in and really clean it up a lot better than I'd get it.